Well, g'day from Australia. It's great to be speaking to you at the International Conference on Men's Issues for 2021. My name is George Christensen. I am a federal member of Parliament in the Commonwealth of Australia, member of our Australian Parliament, have been since 2010. And some people who are watching may recall a famous speech I gave about a decade ago, which is known as the Trojan Horse speech, because at the time the Gillard Labor government in Australia decided that it was going to change our shared parenting laws and make it so that the paramount concern would be the best interests of the child, which sounds all well and noble, but when you scratch the surface a bit, what you found out was that what was happening was this law was actually saying that if there's any accusation, not proven, just an accusation of abuse, family violence, then that would be enough to ensure that a judge or a court has to decide to put that child's safety first. And that would mean that predominantly men could be and would be cut out of the relationship. And I said at the time that this was a Trojan horse in our family law system in Australia that would see false, vexatious claims of family violence or domestic violence and abuse coming forward that would be designed specifically to sever the relationship between the child and a parent, predominantly the father. And I got to say that at the time, I remember people shrieking at me from across the chamber, saying that it was a lie, that there was no such thing as false claims of violence in family law courts. And yet we had at the time a former family law court judge, I think his name was Justice Robert Collier in Australia, who said that he had sat in many cases where there was one of the parties lying to the court about claims of violence for one reason. They wanted to gain custody. They wanted to win the case. And I got to say, like in most situations involving courts, truly the only one that wins out at the end of the day are the lawyers. And I fear that that's the case with family law, and it has been probably before this, but more so ever since those Trojan horse laws came into effect. What we've now got in Australia is family law ambulance chases that put ads in newspapers that ask people if they're considering separation or considering a divorce to come to them. I've heard anecdotally many a time lawyers sitting in front of one of the parties, mostly the woman party, and going through a checklist and actually asking them if any of these things had occurred, and if they had occurred, telling them and informing them that they've been subject to domestic violence. So here was a person who presented before a lawyer, not ever feeling that at one stage, ever believing at any stage that they'd been subjected to domestic violence, but suddenly walks out of that lawyer's office being told, being informed that they had had domestic violence committed against them. In my view, that's actually schooling someone. That's schooling someone possibly in perjury. But yet this is going on all the time. And, there's no doubt that me even speaking to you is going to get me in trouble. The mainstream media in Australia get hold of this video, which they undoubtedly will. Hi, guys. They're going to say that I've given some misogynistic rant to you all, no doubt. I'm not a misogynist. I don't want to give a misogynistic rant. It's a very, very sad observation is what I'm giving about the state of affairs in my country, where basically the family law system is just inherently misandrist, systemically misandrist. It actually goes against men because of the laws themselves. The lawyers who are involved in the system are schooled in the methodologies that they can deploy for their clients to go against men. It's game, set, and match when it comes to the family law system. And we wonder then why so many men take their own lives. Because when you've been through a system that's supposed to be about justice and you get absolutely no justice, for some people, sadly, the only way to turn is to just end it all. And I don't encourage that. I don't want to condone it. Anyone that's feeling thoughts of suicide should seek professional help, because it's not the way to go. Not for you, not for your friends, not for your children, not for anyone. So please seek that help if you are feeling that way. But the reality is undeniable that people are being pushed into those thoughts, those dark, dark thoughts, because they get absolutely and utterly no justice from the system. So there needs to be a better way. I think that better way is returning at first to shared parenting arrangements, where basically from the get-go, the judge and the court has to say to itself that absent of any other factors, that what should be the outcome of any family law case is 50-50 custodial arrangements. That is only fair. It shouldn't be a controversial thing to say, yet it is. Bizarre that. I mean, you've got to say, given that the media and all the academics and all of the do-gooder groups out there would decry that statement, that any family law case, absent of any other factors, the outcome should be 50-50 shared parenting. Given so much attack would come on that statement, we can see what's wrong with the world as it is. It's misandrism. It basically is misandry. So how do we get to that point? Well, that's going to be a long, long march indeed. But it's all about pressure. I know I'm speaking to a global audience here, but I can only speak about the Australian experience. I'm sure that that same experience is borne out in so many other nations around the world. But it just comes from people pressure. And this is not just pressure from men, although predominantly they are the victims in the situation. It's the new partners of men. It's the mothers of those men, the grandmothers of children, the grandmothers and grandparents who never will ever again get to see their children. Why? Because the court system has basically facilitated parental alienation. Now, this is a key point. Parental alienation needs to end. It needs to be listed as a form of child abuse, not because of any political reason, but for one simple fact. It is to deprive a child of access to a biological parent is nothing more than child abuse. Poisoning a child's relationship unnecessarily against a particular parent is a form of child abuse. It's psychological abuse, and this can be life-altering for the worse. Life-altering for the worse. It needs to be called out. And I will say it again. Parental alienation is a form of child abuse. We should have no qualms in saying that phrase over and over and over again until the rest of the public get it and until governments actually adopt it as policy. From that point, we can start then to tackle courts and the legal system that actually encourages parental alienation as an outcome of custodial disputes. I move from the legal system to, which I will return to actually, but I want to move from the legal system to the child support system. I'm sure that many other countries have this sort of system set up whereby instead of government welfare or people just going it on their own, that there is a form of mandated payments that happen from one party to another, normally the non-custodial parent or the one that doesn't have majority custody, in normal cases the father, to the custodial parent or the parent with the majority custody. In most cases, that's the mother. From the get-go, in Australia at least, there is this sort of policy hypocrisy, this sort of cognitive dissonance in public policy, whereby with abortion, we have in most states in Australia abortion on demand. Why? With that abortion on demand, that fathers, the man in the equation, has no rights of veto at all. Not that I'm arguing for it, but I'm just pointing it out. The father, in most cases involving abortion law, has no rights at all. It's a woman's choice, we hear all the time. So the father's rights are completely stripped out of whether or not the woman is going to have the child. But yet, the flip side, if the father doesn't want to have the child, he has absolutely no rights and all responsibility, because if the woman decides to carry the child to birth, and I would always encourage that, being pro-life, but if she decides to do that, then the father must pay. That, my friends, is cognitive dissonance. That is policy hypocrisy on display. And once again, it is going in one direction. It is misandrist at the very best. You can't have your cake and eat it too, but yet in that situation we do. So we have this child support system which has just pushed a lot of men to the wall. I'll tell you about the craziest case that I've heard, and I'm sure that there are many, many more crazy cases out there. There's some absolute and utter horror stories out there. But the craziest case I heard is about a bloke who had a one-night stand with a woman. He didn't know that actually he'd sired a kid as a result of that one-night stand. Many, many, many moons later, like a decade plus later, he suddenly gets a request in the mail, a legal request for a DNA test. And he doesn't know what the hell's going on here. He conforms, he abides by the request, and suddenly finds out he's the father. What he didn't know was that behind the scenes, a family law dispute was going on over custody of the child. And as the trump card, the woman in the equation pulled out the fact that this kid's not actually the other party's, the person who's disputing the custody arrangements. It's not his kid. So she threw that down in a court case. And I've got to tell you, probably one of those moments where you want to give the judge a medal, because the judge actually said, how disgraceful that was, that she had deployed that tactic without informing the child, without informing the other party. She just deployed that in court. And so the judge looked very, very dimly on the whole situation, and he awarded a fair custody arrangement where both parties would get custody. But still, my constituent, the guy who never even knew he had a kid, so it was just a one-night stand arrangement, guess what? He has to pay child support still to the woman in question. What a bizarre situation. But yet this is what actually goes on. Many men are driven to the wall by this. You have situations arising frequently, where court-ordered custody arrangements, which form the basis normally for the sort of payment system, the amount of time that the one party has the child versus the amount of time the other party has the child, that forms the basis for whatever payment is made from one party to another. And so what happens is there might be a split arrangement of 70-30, something like that, in terms of percentages. One parent's taking care of the child, and one of the parties decides that they're no longer going to abide by that. So they make it 100% of the care or custody is for them and 0% for the other person. They've done that against court orders. Next thing, the aggrieved party, normally the bloke, finds a letter in the mail from the child support agency saying, you've got to pay more in child support. So they've been robbed of visitation rights, actually having a relationship with their child, and then been sent a notice in the mail that they have to pay more for it. And so when these aggrieved fathers go to this government agency and say, hey, look, I actually want to be caring for my child. What's happened here is that the other party, my ex-partner or the mother of the child, she has breached court orders. She has actually ensured the situation is that I get no time with the child, and you're asking me to pay more for that fact that she's actually taking care of the child when she shouldn't be. I should be. And you know what they say to the poor sod? They say to him, tough luck, that's not our business. That's actually the business of the courts. Go and get a remedy. Well, I've tried to do what I can to actually fix this situation in the Australian Parliament. I oversat a child support inquiry, and I've got to say that I had a bunch of feminists on it, so I was hardly going to get anywhere, but I did get a little bit of wriggle room in ensuring that the time frame for those blokes, which was once just 14 weeks to get a remedy in a court. You couldn't even get an application into the court in 14 weeks. So normally these things take well and truly more than a year. But I got that time frame extended so that now there is the ability of blokes to go and remedy the situation in court. But I got to tell you, they shouldn't have to go to court for it. There should be a policeman on the beat with this. There should be someone that actually knocks on the door and says to someone who's breached court orders, you've done the wrong thing here and now you're in trouble. There's going to be consequences. And the consequence shouldn't be that they get more money through child support. That is just rubbing salt into a very, very raw and open wound. So there's a lot that needs to change, in our system. I want to just go back to the law. One of the big things that we could do to completely overturn the family law system is to get stuff out of the courts, to get it into forced mediation, to ensure that the nexus between family breakdowns and courts is just no longer there. That would be the ultimate. It's a big goal. I can't see it happening, quite frankly, in my lifetime, but if you don't start pushing for it, you're never going to get there. Why on earth should we be having these disputes in courts anyway? I mean, this is about relationships. This is about love. This is not about something that the law can really honestly deal with. When it comes to violence, yes, the law can deal with that. There has to be the burden of proof to say that someone's guilty of family violence, though, not just an accusation. Accusations can be made about all sorts of things, and sometimes they're not true. But when it comes to just pure family relationships, why on earth is there a man in a wig and a robe sitting there adjudicating on this? Doesn't anyone else see this situation as kind of crazy? Why on earth actually is government even involved in regulating our relationships? Why do we need a piece of paper from the government to say that this person and this person can actually be together? That seems to me sort of crazy as well. So there's a lot that we've got to unpick. Some people might disagree with me on that, but I think that these are the kind of issues that we need to start pushing. Because if we don't, we're going to get nowhere. We've seen where doing nothing gets us. Where it gets us is the mess that we're in at the moment, the misandrist judicial system we've got, the ongoing accusations of domestic violence deployed as weapons to ensure that someone loses custody. That's what we see. Parental alienation. That's what we see. Unfair child support systems. That's what we see. And men being driven into the ground to the point of despair, to the point where they take their own lives. That's what we see. How wrong is the system? Very wrong. It needs to be fixed. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.